Okay, good evening, class, and welcome to another video lecture. It's been quite a while that I was able to upload video lectures, and I already explained it in our group chat. Now, so today or tonight, rather, we will be discussing crimes against public order. Now, these crimes again under this title. Specifically, Chapter 1, it will cover Article 134 to 142. So basically, if you look at the chapter, it only talks about more or less four major crimes. Okay, so let's start with Article 134. Okay, so 134 talks about rebellion or insurrection. Now, what do you mean by rebellion? There is rebellion when the object of the movement is completely to overthrow and supersede the existing government. Meaning, ang purpose nga nung nagtapok-tapok ni nga mga grupo nga mga tao is gusto nila nga pahawaon na ang present nga gobyerno. That is rebellion. And when you say insurrection, it is used in reference to a movement which seeks merely to effect some change of minor importance or to prevent the exercise of governmental authority with respect to particular matters or subject. Now, ang rebellion, if you try to look at the two, a rebellion wants to overthrow the government, while insurrection to effect some minor changes in the government. So, when can we say that there is rebellion or insurrection? So, number one, there is public uprising, meaning ang mga tao mismo magkagubot o mag-uban, no, ang mga masa, and taking arms against the government. So, it is important that there is taking arms. Sa maning taking arms, magda sila o magamit sila og mga armas. So that is the first element in rebellion. Second, the purpose of the uprising or the movement is either to remove from the allegiance to said government or its laws the territory of the Philippines or any part thereof, meaning gusto sila naghimo sila ani nga movement with arms para ang usa ka territory sa Philippines or part ani mobuwag na sa Philippines, or any body of land, naval, or other armed forces, or to deprive the chief executive or Congress wholly or partially of any of their powers or prerogative. So what is important in rebellion is there is public uprising, there is taking up of arms, and you have to look at the purpose of the movement. Whether the purpose is to overthrow the government or to separate a specific territory from the Philippines or to deprive the chief executive or Congress of its function. So mao na ang if naan ang tulo, then the crime of rebellion or insurrection is committed. Now, what is the difference between rebellion and treason? No, both are crimes committed against the state. However, in rebellion, you are waging a war during the time of peace, no? And the purpose of rebellion is katong i-mention ganina. While treason, it is performed at a time of war. And the purpose of treason is to aid the enemy country. Sumutabang ka sa enemy country. Mo na ang treason. Sa rebellion, gusto nimo pahawaon ang gobyerno. Rebellion always involves taking up arms. Dapat na ay armas jud in order for the movement to be considered a rebellion. While in treason, it does not necessarily involve arms because the mere fact of comforting or giving aid to the enemy is considered treason. So that is the difference between treason and rebellion. Okay. Now let's go to Article 134-A. What is that crime? That is the crime of coup d'etat. It is spelled as coup d'etat, but that is read as coup d'etat. So, what is coup d'etat, or when can we say that a coup d'etat is committed? So, first and foremost, in order for a person to commit coup d'etat, the offender is a person or persons belonging to the military or police or holding any public office or employment. So, dapat you are not a private person. Dapat you are from the military or from the police or any public office. When you say public office, you are part of the government. Second, it is committed by means of swift attack accompanied by violence, intimidation, threat, strategy, or stealth. And then the attack is directly against duly constituted authorities of the government or any military camp or installation, communications network, public utilities, or other facilities needed for the exercise and continued possession of power. And the purpose of the attack is to seize or diminish the state power. Okay, so what is the latest jurisprudence, not jurisprudence, but one of the famous coup d'etat cases in the modern times is the coup d'etat committed by Antonio Trillanes the Fourth. No, so if you remember, last 2003, um, he led the Oakwood Mutiny when he and 321 junior officers and enlisted men of the AFP took over Oakwood Premier Ayala Center. So, um, he was known he became known because of the 2003 Oakwood Mutiny, and it was considered a coup d'etat against the then President GMA. So that was the purpose, to more or less rebel or protest against the GMA administration. So again, a coup d'etat is committed by a military or police officer or holding any public office or employment. However, coup d'etat may be committed with or without civilian participation. So, sa coup d'etat, there are leaders, no, there are leaders, and the leader is any person who promotes, maintains, or heads a rebellion or insurrection. So on difference, a rebellion, they're taking up arms. Most likely, this is committed by private persons. However, in coup d'etat, it is led by military or police officers, any person holding public office. Okay. And then the participants, of course, those who participate or executed the commands of the leader of the rebellion, insurrection, or coup d'etat. So we have art also, that is coup d'etat. And then we have Article 136, that is conspiracy and proposal to commit coup d'etat, conspiracy to commit rebellion or insurrection, and proposal to commit rebellion or insurrection. So we said in Book 1 that the mere proposal and conspiring does not constitute a crime. However, it is different in the case of treason and in the case of coup d'etat, insurrection, and rebellion, because the mere fact of agreeing and deciding to rise publicly and take arms against the government for purposes of rebellion or insurrection is already subject to punishment. Okay, so that is the exception to the rule wherein conspiring and proposing to commit a crime is not punishable. Why? Because the crime of rebellion, insurrection, coup d'etat, and just like treason involves the state. And it is also about public order. So uh, you know, might as well punish those who plan to commit these kinds of crimes. Okay. And then we have Article 138, that is inciting to rebellion. Now, what do you mean by inciting to rebellion? So you commit the crime of inciting to rebellion when the offender or when the offender does not take arms or is not in open hostility against the government, meaning dili siya ipakita nga magbitbit siya og pusil, maapil siya sa mga movement. However, he incites others to the execution of any acts of the rebellion. So when you say he incites, isang gi-encourage ang mga tao nga mo join sa rebellion. So how is inciting to rebellion done? Usually, it is done through means of speeches, proclamations, writings, emblems, banners, or other representation tending to the same end. So, ang inciting to rebellion, from the word incite, meaning to invite, no, to invite others to join the rebellion, the person violating this crime does not really take up arms against the government, but he is still punishable under the law because he incites or he invites people to join the rebellion. So that is inciting to rebellion under 138. Okay. Now we have another crime. Now we already discussed two crimes. We have rebellion, two major crimes. We have rebellion and insurrection, and we have coup d'etat. Now let's go to Article 139. So Article 139 is sedition. What is sedition? It is the raising of commotions or disturbances in the state. Right, raising of commotions and disturbances. What is the difference between sedition and rebellion? Nga pareha raman sila nga ang na public uprising, na kagubot, no? Both, no? There is public uprising. However, in sedition, the public uprising should be tumultuous. Tumultuous. What do you mean by tumultuous? So when you say tumultuous, I want to share it with you. So when you say tumultuous, it means that it is loud, no, ruly, no, samok siya. Enough nga tumultuous siya na ay disorder, no, samok siya, kagubot jud siya, public uprising na ay daghang mga tao na pagajoy kagubot daana. That is enough na to qualify for sedition. However, sa rebellion, again, always remember, in rebellion, there is always taking up of arms against the government. In sedition, usually the purpose is political, meaning against the government, but also it could be a social end. No? Gusto sila for the farmers, gusto sila for the poor, anything about society. While in rebellion, it is always political. Why? Because the purpose of rebellion is always to overthrow the government. So that is the difference between sedition and rebellion. So again, in sedition, it is enough that there is a public uprising and it is tumultuous, meaning gubot, samok kaadyo. And then second, they employ force, intimidation, or other means outside legal methods. So, kanang muna magdaog mamuno, magdaog mga kanang stakes, mga dos, no? And then the offenders employ any of those means to attain any of the following objects. Kaya naman dyan mga tumults, but if dili siya mosod sa objects under sedition, then it cannot be considered sedition. Okay. So, the purpose, no, if you try to look at these cases, you have to look at the purpose. No, nganong ila man yung gibuhat. So you have to look at the purpose of the uprising in order to identify whether the case or whether the crime is for rebellion, insurrection, coup d'etat, sedition. So, The objects in committing the crime of sedition is to prevent the promulgation or execution of any law or holding of any popular election. So magkagubot para di na magka-election. Second, to prevent the national, provincial, or municipal government or public officer from freely exercising its or his function. So if you try to look at rebellion, it is the chief executive or the Congress ang imong i-prevent. However, in sedition, it could be the national government, the provincial, or the municipal or city government, or any public officer thereof. Another purpose for sedition is to inflict any act of hate or revenge upon the person or property of any public officer or employee. So gusto kang maglagot ang mga tao ang public officer or employee and nag-imong gipagubot ang inyong community, then that can be considered sedition. But publicly ha, meaning daghan mo, mass movement. And then to commit for any political or social end any act of hate or revenge against private persons or any social class, like mga pobre, di ganahan sa mga dato, magkagubot ta para makabawas sa mga dato. So that is sedition. And another purpose is to despoil for any political or social end any person, municipality, or province or the national government of all its property or any part thereof. Meaning, magkagubot mo, magtapok-tapok mo mga tao, magkagubot mo, employ mo force, mangguba mo sa property sa LGU, for example. That is considered sedition under Article 139. So, in order for the crime, again, to be considered sedition, there must be a public uprising and there must, the object of the public uprising must be within the five that I mentioned under Article 139. So again, in the cases of rebellion, coup d'etat, and sedition, you must look at the purpose. It is not enough that there is a public uprising. You must look at the purpose of the public uprising. Kaya kung ang public uprising or ang tumult is gubot ra jud, then pwede siya dili nga crime liable but in another crime. And then we have Article 141, of course, conspiracy to commit sedition. So again, this is an exception to the rule wherein the fact of conspiring to commit sedition is punishable. However, there is no proposal to commit sedition. Kaya lang nag-conspire na mo, nag-agree na mo, ug ning-decide na mo nga mo commit sa sedition, then you could be liable under Article 141. And then we have Article 142, inciting to sedition. So, sa giingon pa nato inciting to rebellion, napod tay mga inciting to sedition. So, unsa may mga acts wherein we can say that there is inciting to sedition? Inciting to sedition to accomplish any of its object, no? So, atong lima ka object nga atong i-mention a while ago. And then, in inciting to sedition, the offender does not take direct part in the crime of sedition. Just like sa inciting to rebellion, dili siya mo take arms. Sa inciting to sedition, dili siya mo apil o gubot-gubot. However, he invites others to join the tumults. No? Apil siya. And how does he do this? By, again, speeches, proclamations, writings, emblems, cartoons, banners, and other representation tending to do the same end. So again, it is always about the purpose. And then it is done by uttering seditious words or speeches which tend to disturb the public peace. No? And then writing or publishing or circulating scurrilous libels against the government. No, but again, it doesn't mean nga musuwat ka og libelous against the government, automatic nga sedition. Again, we have to look at the purpose. Why is there public uprising? Why is there an incite or an invitation to do public uprising? So it all goes back to the purpose. So that is inciting to sedition. So basically, that is chapter 1. Am I right? Basically, that is chapter 1 of the crime against public order, rebellion, sedition, and disloyalty. So if you have any questions, you may do it in our chat box. Thank you and good evening.